Hey guys, how's it going today? I want to talk about something. Well, first of all, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of talk about this whole abstraction thing, right? And me and Burb, we're slowly kind of developing this sort of theory and idea regarding what a lot of cluster A sort of stuff is, but specifically, since that's our focus, what's going on with the schizoid mind when it comes to like a lot of stuff, how they experience life, and the neurodiverse aspects of it. um, not necessarily to be associated or conflated with the adaptation stuff, the schizoid adaptations, but the neurodiversity aspects that many schizoids deal with outside of the realm of how they adapt to their environment necessarily. So, it's like a chicken or the egg, but in this case, I think it's the egg. Um, I want to break down some of it over time because when we talk about it in a kind of really wide or kind of vague capacity, where it's like all encompassing and stuff, it tends to alienate certain people because they don't experience it, or they don't experience the same way we're describing it, or are anecdotally describing our own experiences with it. And so sometimes it'll translate to, oh, if you don't experience it like this, that means you're not experiencing it. Or if you don't feel about it this way, that's not what's happening. Like, and so then some zoids watch it and they go, that's not what I think about, so that must mean that you're wrong or something, or that's not what's happening. It's like, okay, well, so I want to break down some of this stuff that we've been theorizing and talking about a little bit more. So maybe occasional rambles, I'll be able to kind of talk about some of these things in ways that make sense to me, and I'll translate it in ways that maybe make sense to more people and outside of the context of how I personally experience that particular thing. Though, knowing me, I'll probably throw in an anecdote or two, but don't take my anecdotes or my experiences on how it functions or how it seems be the, what is it, start all or end all on the matter, because that's ludicrous. I'm just one man. Okay, so today I want to talk about one specific aspect of it, which is categorical pessimism. Okay, so what I mean by that is that there is certain types of categories that the schizoid often will. Sorry, I had to pause there for a second. Um, we'll have these kind of experiences like anybody else in our lives, but many times what seems to be occurring is we'll have like a categorical perception of a thing. And I'm not talking about like, specific individuals in our lives that causes specific types of discomfort. That happens, right? But because of those individuals in our lives that cause, say, trauma, discomfort, neglect, whatever, or because of interactions that are particularly bad, or we tried to express ourselves in a specific time in our lives and it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. One of which I think is that neurodiversity aspect. Um, I think what happens is we will get broad categories and decide that those things are now attached to some negative outcome or negative thing. And when we do that, we'll get broad categories and concepts and place a certain level of pessimism or a negative affiliation to those things. And so then the concept in and of itself becomes tainted in our minds by this kind of nebulous thing that is bad, right? And I'm trying to think of a kind of more easy example. And it's not tied. This is one thing I really, really want to point out. It's not really tied to any kind of sense of tribalism or kind of conventional forms of prejudgment about groups of people or anything like that. It's not really about that. That's definitely what's occurring, and it's not because of social ramifications, and it's also not because um, the society around us has a specific culture that doesn't like a specific category of things, right? So that's not the issue either, because that's not what's influencing a lot of us. What's influencing a lot of us is our own personal analysis and exploration of that category based on what we understand and what we learn. And I'm not saying that these affiliations are permanent. They're not. In fact, they're very malleable. They can change and so on. But there's certain ones that once they're driven into you since childhood, and not by an outside force, just by your own experiences and interpretation and your incompatibility with the world around you, oftentimes, you will have this pessimism that'll develop about a very, very abstract category of something. For example, conversation. Right? Let's say just just the idea. What is conversation? What is conversation? Okay. So, in the sense of that, like, let's just say you grow up trying to have conversations, and from childhood, this becomes increasingly difficult because the way you converse, the things you're interested in conversing about, the ideas that you gravitate toward, the questions you have, um, either run in conflict with the culture, uh, normative sort of understandings of what is okay and not okay to discuss or question, based on that culture, as well as just kind of general human motivators. Like in most societies, you don't go around questioning too much about why we should gather resources in this way or in that way, or why these types of conversations are important to people, and why people care about these things that kind of conventionally care about, and so on and so forth. So when you run counter to some of that stuff because of your own thinking, your own value system, you start having problems in your ability to converse with others, because even if you have a willingness to do so, you oftentimes will come to a situation in which you will say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, be misinterpreted, be misunderstood by what it is you're trying to express or say, uh, say have no maliciousness uh, or projected maliciousness. People project maliciousness onto your words, your phrasing, coldness. They see some of your detachment as arrogance, so on and so forth, right? So when that happens, even from, say, you're a young adult and onward, you start associating the idea of conversation to miscommunication, to being rejected, to being like your conversational needs being neglected, ignored, other people putting their own, or in your perception, you know, selfishly wanting to take conversations and ideas only in directions that they deem worthy, and so on. And that includes like authority figures throughout your life, institutional figures, whether they be, your local, teacher, or the older kids, or older brother, older sister, mother, father, people that are kind of authorities in your life early on. They either disregard or dismiss some of the way you think, some of the questions you have, some of the perspectives you produce. And so anytime conversation comes up, it usually becomes associated with the idea that it's worthless. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't do anything. It only accomplishes nothing but other people doing this or that, or making decisions for you about what you think and what you feel, and so on. And so now the broad category of conversation has a negative association. And it's interesting too, because oftentimes those negative associations, a lot of schizoids do, they're not like hyper intelligized, or intellectualized, sorry, but a lot of the times they can be, right? So, we'll come up with a rationale for why conversation is um, fruitless, and how there are better ways of communicating, and so on and so forth, and yada yada, and the problems with language, and yada yada. Some people do all that. Others just go, I don't like the way conversation makes me feel. It makes me feel gross. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I associate conversation to bad things. I don't want to be in conversations, right? So we all kind of deal with some of these negative, or at least pessimism regarding categories, very uniquely, right? So that's the part I want to talk about too, is that the way we express our pessimism or uh, discomfort with a category of interpersonal communication, or touch, or ideas like romance and so on and so forth, friendship, all the negative associations we've kind of established in connection to that category based on our only source of reference, which was our lives, essentially like what we experienced. And then on top of that, other sources of references, such as other people discussing it, other people talking about their own experiences, seeing those experiences be shown in some media and things like that, and the way they're described, not being the way you feel about it, not being the way that makes sense to you. And so, thus, the broad category becomes like a big no no in your mind. And you have no other point of reference. And that's just kind of how it ends up for years and years and years at a time. And it's very, very hard to, even if you come across a situation in which the opposite could occur, you can actually partake in a form of it that is unconventional and is a form that you can enjoy. A lot of the times you'll pass it over or won't even realize it's in front of you because you've already associated the category of conversation or whatever it is to all this pessimism regarding it because of those negative associations. And it doesn't have to be as meta as all that. Um, for example, it could be types of conversations. Okay, so let's just say, but for some people, it's been conversation as a whole, the idea of conversing, yeah. But let's just say certain types of conversation, right? Certain subjects become negatively associated. Sorry, again, I had to pause because of stuff. So let me see where I can get back on track here. Oh yeah, so not categories as such, but subcategories, right? So maybe you've attempted to have conversation on a topic that you found interesting at one point. Let's just say, I don't know, sports. I don't know, not sports. Okay, let's just say sports, right? I doubt you're going to be interested in sports, most of us, but let's just say sports. Okay, so you thought, oh, sports are interesting. Okay, I want to find out more about sports. What is sports, right? So then you try to talk to people, maybe you're in your younger years, you're a teen or something, and you're like, what's the sports thing about? Like, well, what's going on with, why do people talk about this? Like, is this important? What's that important? Right? And then so you try to have a conversation with people about sports. So you go to people that, seemingly like sports, like they're wearing a team jersey or so on and so forth. And then you converse with them like, oh, so you like this team? Yes, I do. Oh, okay. And then you're like, so what's up with like this or what's up with that? And why do people do this? And why are people interested in teams? And well, why is it so important? And so on and so forth. And let's just say the way people respond to it, a normative person kind of would respond to it would either be inquisitively like, what are you talking about? Dismissively, or generally like in a kind of annoyed tone, or they would say, well, I like my team. And then if you ask them like, well, why do you like your team? What makes your team different? And they might think that you're talking bad about their team or whatever, right? So this is just, it's kind of a poor example, but I'm just giving you an example of a subcategory in which conversation could probably go awry. And so if you attempt to have a conversation of this type or bring up this subject and you try to approach it in a sincere sort of kind of good faith sort of way, because of some of your miscommunication or the way you think, it causes a misunderstanding between you and the other person. It could cause kind of rifts in that conversation, or conversations either will go nowhere or fall apart, or they won't have answers for you, or they'll get annoyed with you, or get angry with you. Who knows, right? Or you'll make someone sad. And so then you now start creating a negative association to the category of sports in conversation, right? But then it might extend to the category of sports itself. And so now anything associated to, well, it could just be football, right? But then if you abstract it further, it'll turn into sports, and then it'll turn into tribes or teams, and it can go from there depending on how far you abstract out, right? And how stuck you get in that. And then you start having this pessimism toward broader categories associated to what sports is, and so on, right? Because you think about it further and further, or you don't think about it further, and you just kind of cast away that particular subcategory. It just, and that's the thing. This is what makes it so unique, is that, and it's kind of like what I'm trying to pose here, is that the reason so many of us are different, and so many of us have, say, pessimism or optimism regarding specific categories and ideas, concepts, if you will, is because we had different life experiences, right? We've stumbled across different kinds of people. We've had positive and negative interactions, as positive and negative as they can be, considering the situation sometimes. But point is, there is a variety of life experiences that might shape the pessimism or optimism or whatever that you may have under specific categories, subcategories, or concepts and ideas. And oftentimes, like the way an individual, so let's just say, treats you, you might start kind of painting specific aspects of behavior in a broad category, right? So you might think, and most of the time, because of the way we think, not always, but a lot of the times, these kind of uh, negative associations to categories are not just kind of irrational. They're usually like, it's not like, oh, this person, usually it's not like, oh, this person that wore a hat was mean to me or was a jerk, and so now I don't like people that wear hats. It's usually like, it could be that, but that's just start getting into a different sort of realm. That's when it starts getting into a different kind of the slide meter of function and control over abstraction and things like that. It kind of starts sliding over into the less functional and more difficult to manage, sort of to kind of put a check on yourself on certain things. But generally, especially if we're talking schizoid, that's not usually the case. Usually, we'll make kind of arguments in our heads, or positions, or rationalizations, or logical steps to why it is that that thing is now not good, and things associated to that are not good, and so thus I should avoid those types of associations or things regarding that, because of the things I associated to it. So, and I see this pattern happen again and again and again. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in a lot of people on the server. I've seen it people I've talked to on YouTube. People have emailed me. People that have DM'd me on other platforms. Whatever. Like, they've kind of expressed this sort of thing, even if they aren't necessarily aware of where it's coming from or why they're doing it, right? Because they've already created an argument or a logical rationalization for why they're doing it, and usually it's sound, but it's only sound within the realm of their own experiences, not really sound outside of that. Because if you introduce other references, then some of those assertions they make about broad categories start kind of falling apart on themselves. And oftentimes that can cause a certain level of discomfort and a certain type of cognitive dissonance that can be uh, not fun for people, right? Schizoids included. So, some of us, though, like myself, for whatever reason, like to just smash my head into, cognitive dissonance. I actually like when it occurs, because it just means I'm onto something. But it's an uncomfortable feeling, but nonetheless, productive suffering is good, at least in my opinion. But some people don't like it at all, so there tends to be a certain level of discomfort. And so they decide, oh, this isn't for me. It makes me uncomfortable for reasons I'm not fully necessarily understanding, or maybe they are self-aware enough to know why, but they just don't want to deal with it. So then they don't, and that's how it goes. And so some of these differences in life experiences, and the differences in what we place some of that pessimism in specific categories, and when we do this oftentimes because of the abstract nature of the thinking that we generally go toward, like, like the more meta sort of thinking, if you will. Um, it makes us all very unique, right? From schizoid to schizoid, we're not uniform thinkers, where we might have some, in my opinion, in my theory, and Bird's as well, we might have certain cognitive predispositions that go in certain directions on the way we think, but not what we think about and how we think about it. I hope that makes sense. It's about the conversation I'm trying to pose is about the way we think, not what we think about or how, but the way we think, and the way we learn and the way we experience things. And obviously, that's going to be shaped by our own unique experiences, personalities, and so on and so forth. Because suppressed as they may be, oftentimes, because of other reasons I've discussed, we do have individual personalities, even though they aren't quite as apparent to the outside world, because we look like we just don't have much of a personality to most, or because other people don't see a personality there, we start thinking that we don't have one or something, or maybe we don't know we have one because it's so terribly suppressed, depending again on a variety of factors. Because some schizoids are more withdrawn than others, some are more unable to deal with certain levels of discomfort than others, some are more tenacious than others. It's just how it is, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a matter of knowing your limits and trying to exceed those limits if you feel comfortable enough to do that. And there's certain limits that maybe not will not be exceeded, at least not without a price. So it just varies. And that's kind of what I wanted to clear up today. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, which I did, category stuff. And I wanted to talk a bit about we're all very, very different from just like every other human being, neurotypical and otherwise. We're very unique. We're very different. We have very specific special interests. We have interpretations that are unique to our own experience. We have various levels of, what's the word, detail we can spiral into. Others avoid the spiraling. Other people dive right into it. Other people dabble. And what I mean by spiraling is like going from like one abstract category to another, to another, to another, right? And when it gets like that, some people get really uncomfortable, or provokes anxiety, or or they shut down and they're like, I don't want to do this. This isn't good. And other people are like, yeah, So it just, so there can be conflicts, which is interesting too, from schizoid to schizoid. So there can be conflicts in personality, especially once those personalities start flourishing, and there'll be conflicts there. There'll be conflicts in a way people adjust to discomfort and things like that, and so arguments occur there, and then conflict occurs, and so on and so forth. Just because a lot of us seem like we're just really calm and chill, and not all angry and stuff. I'm the last one to speak because I'm a pretty angry person for a schizoid. Um, but well, not angry. That sounds bad, but you know what I mean. Assertive. I don't know. Not aggressive. I don't know how to put it. But and some of us aren't, and so on and so forth. And you might be able to relate to one thing and then relate to another thing, but not relate to this thing and that thing. And then we start, and that's what's interesting too, is that and I'm not calling anyone specific out because I've had many people do this or talk to me about this, and they'll reference something that I said in either a ramble or a stream or something, and they'll say, "Oh, I agree with this and this, but this you brought this particular category up in association to what we are, what we experience, and so thus I now find that particular thing unrelatable." And I've heard that like more than enough times already from a variety of Zoids. And that's kind of what I'm trying to tell them too right now, is that I get it. I don't relate to some of your own experiences either, or how you experience those things. I don't relate to your interest in specific things or your interpretation. But I do relate to the fact that we all kind of endure a certain level of suffering, discomfort, and so on, associated with what I believe to be this disconnect from the vast majority of human society because of our neurodiversity. That is the part that I think we all share. Um, of course, there's going to be people that are just going to be like, no, that's not true. It's, being schizoid has nothing to do with being neurodiverse, in the sense that, like, it doesn't have anything to do with, having a specific or a kind of different kind of cognition and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, I've heard those arguments. The only thing is that I generally, and this might be anecdotal, but in the year that I've been doing this, and I probably technically spoken to more Zoids on an individual or interpersonal level than, well, shit, maybe more than any human being ever has. I don't know. Even more than most psychs have come across. So, that's funny. I didn't think about it like that. I just see these patterns reoccur and reoccur and reoccur and reoccur. Whether they're Zoids that only like to chat text, whether there's Zoids that have only emailed me once or twice, whether there's Zoids that have texted me on a platform a couple of times, or ones that I actually talk to, and like, on a consistent basis, ones that came into it disagreeing with this idea and then realizing, maybe there's something to this, and then going, oh no, I think you may be right, and then it somehow helping them, and so on and so forth. For some, causing them, this cognitive dissonance issue pertaining to it, and so on and so forth. Like I've just come across it way too many times. I've had other people come across it way too many times. And this is currently the only point of reference that anyone can point to pertaining to being able to have a community or interacting with a large number of schizoids, or schizoids interacting with each other, and being able to kind of at least gather enough, even if just, anecdotal information, between a variety of people from different backgrounds and different experiences, and so on and so forth. There are diagnosed or self-diagnosed schizoid, and so on and forth, or greatly, and so on. Um, and just seeing this come up a time and time and time and time and time again. This abstraction related sort of thinking. And I just think it's interesting because it also doesn't have anything necessarily to do with like competence or functionality or intelligence necessarily. You know, like I've met some schizoids that are far more intelligent than I am, and they are able to maybe use or know the terminology or specific types of language to describe some of the things that I'm saying that I can't describe because I don't have those language, or I didn't do that study. Or maybe it's a way of thinking that maybe is a little bit out of my reach, but I understand what they're saying, and then I can get that information, and I can go, okay, I can ground this a little bit. So that's what I'm seeing. And then I've seen schizoids that, like, I get more into the theory and stuff like that, and they're like not interested in it, but the things they're saying they experience are kind of making sense. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is coming together. I'm understanding this. So anyway, that's it. That's all I want to talk about today. Yeah, whatever. Bye.